There is a narrative about Alberta that has dominated Canadian political conversation for the past several years. A narrative of grievance, of alienation, of a province that feels overlooked, overtaxed, and undervalued by a federal government that does not understand it. That narrative is not entirely wrong. The frustrations are real. The pipeline cancellations were real. The equalization debates were real. The sense that Ottawa made decisions about Alberta's most important industry without fully understanding or respecting what that industry means to the people who built it is real. But that narrative is also incomplete, because it leaves out something that Mark Carney said out loud this week in the Library of Parliament, something that should be said more often and more clearly by federal leaders. Alberta did not just contribute to Canada. Alberta helped build it. The famous five who came to Ottawa a century ago and won women the right to vote in this country. The prime ministers, the parliamentarians, the musicians and scientists and athletes, the farmers who feed the world, the workers who turned an impossible geological dream into one of Canada's largest industries, the engineers and innovators who are now building the carbon capture technology that will make Alberta oil the lowest carbon intensity product of its kind in the global market. This is the Alberta that Carney stood in the Library of Parliament and honored. And this is the Alberta that is now at the center of Canada's most ambitious nation-building agenda in a generation.
I think when I come to Parliament of the great Albertans, there's many, too many to list, their contributions from the first Alberta Prime Minister, Joe Clark, our youngest Prime Minister, of course, Prime Minister Stephen Harper, Don Mazinkowski, legendary parliamentarian from Vegreville, and that's in my lifetime. Go farther back, think of Maureen Irene Parlby of the Alberta Five, later redubbed the Famous Five, but who came here to Ottawa about a century ago and led the person's case, brought the person's case that led to women having the right to vote in Canada.
The person's case. Most Canadians know the outcome. Fewer remember what it actually required. In 1927, 5 Alberta women, Emily Murphy, Nellie McClung, Irene Parlby, Louise McKinney, and Henrietta Muir-Edwards, petitioned the Supreme Court of Canada to answer a question that should never have needed asking. Are women persons under the British North America Act and therefore eligible to be appointed to the Senate? The Supreme Court said no. Women were not persons for the purposes of Senate appointment. So the Famous Five appealed to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council in London, the highest court of appeal for Canada at the time. And in 1929, that court reversed the ruling. Women are persons. The exclusion of women from public life based on a deliberately narrow reading of the word persons was overturned. 5 Alberta women, 1 century ago, coming to Ottawa and changing the fundamental legal definition of who counts in Canadian public life. That story matters today, not as historical sentiment, but as evidence of something specific about Alberta's relationship to Canada. Alberta has never been a passive recipient of Confederation. It has been a force within it, a province that has sent its most determined people to Ottawa not to accommodate the existing order, but to change it when the existing order was wrong. The Famous Five did not accept the Supreme Court's answer. They went further, and Canada is better for it. That spirit, the spirit of going further when others say it cannot be done, is the spirit that Carney invoked in the Library of Parliament. And it is the spirit that is now building a pipeline to Asian markets that everyone said was impossible.
This is Alberta and Canada coming together. It's about having a carbon market that functions, so that aspect of the agreement. It's about the methane reductions. It's about a series of changes in the renewable market here, which will help that come in as a complement. It includes the changes to the clean, proposed changes to the clean electricity regulations, which are referenced, and all of which puts together a package, and I will repeat in French if you wish, puts together a package that creates opportunity, creates energy security, reduces emissions, and is affordable for Albertans and Canadians. Affordable today and affordable tomorrow.
Alberta strong and a Canada strong for all. That phrase is the contemporary expression of the same argument the famous five were making a century ago, that Alberta's strength and Canada's strength are not competing interests. They are the same interest approached from different angles. For too long, the political conversation about Alberta's place in Confederation has been framed as a zero-sum negotiation. Alberta's gain is Ottawa's concession. Ottawa's environmental commitment is Alberta's economic constraint. The pipeline Alberta needs is the coastline British Columbia must sacrifice. Every gain for one side comes at another side's expense. The Calgary Agreement dismantled that framing, not rhetorically, with specific commitments that deliver for both sides simultaneously. Alberta gets the pipeline to Asian markets it has wanted for decades. The federal government gets the carbon capture project and methane reductions that make Canadian oil globally competitive on emissions credentials. British Columbia gets the guarantee of substantial economic benefits from projects that affect its coast. Indigenous communities get free, prior, and informed consent and meaningful economic ownership. Nobody had to lose for everyone to gain. That is the insight at the center of Carney's cooperative federalism approach, and it required the same willingness to go further, to find the solution that others said could not exist, that the famous five demonstrated a century ago in this same city. Alberta strong and Canada strong for all, not despite each other, because of each other.
Canada is the greatest country in the world, but it can be better, and we're working on making it better. We're working with Alberta on making it better. We're renovating the country as we go, and Alberta being at the center of that is essential.
Alberta being at the center of that is essential. Not a courtesy, not diplomatic language, a statement of strategic fact. Because the nation-building agenda that Carney has been executing over the past year depends on Alberta in ways that are specific and irreplaceable. The pipeline to Asian markets carrying 1 million barrels per day. The Pathways carbon capture project that will make Alberta oil the lowest carbon intensity product in the global market. The methane reduction agreement that delivers a 75% cut in emissions by 2035. The carbon market that will reach an effective price of $130 per ton by 2040 with binding annual benchmarks. None of that happens without Alberta, and none of it happens without the skilled workers who will build it. The pipe fitters and plumbers and electricians of Local 496 in Calgary, who Carney visited the week before, standing in the Library of Parliament. The engineers and geologists and environmental scientists who have been developing the Pathways technology for years. The farmers and agricultural workers who are already benefiting from the reopened export markets that the new trade agreements have unlocked. Canada is renovating as it goes, and the renovation metaphor Carney used in Parliament is more precise than it might initially appear. A building under renovation is not abandoned. It is lived in while it is improved. The work is disruptive. Some things have to be torn out before better things can be put in their place. But the goal is not demolition. It is a building that works better, that heats better, that cools better, that is safer and more welcoming and more fit for the future than the one that existed before. Canada is that building right now, and Alberta is load-bearing.
Canada was built by Indigenous peoples and voyageurs who mapped this continent and built trading networks from coast to coast to coast before, with due respect, the Americans had even left St. Louis. Whenever we have something over the Americans, we're going to use it. I'm sorry. After the Second World War, Canadians built new neighborhoods for hundreds of thousands of returning veterans, new universities, the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Trans-Canada Highway, Expo 67, inspiring the world. The point is, we used to build in this country.
We used to build in this country, and we are building again. That declaration connects the famous five to the oil sands workers, to the pipeline builders, to the graphite mine in Quebec, to the Arctic Highway in the Northwest Territories. Canada's history of ambitious building has never been exclusively federal. It has always been a partnership between the federal government and the regions that have the resources, the workers, and the determination to turn national vision into industrial reality. The Transcontinental Railway required the prairies. The St. Lawrence Seaway required Quebec. The development of the oil sands required Alberta. And what Alberta brought to each of those moments was not just resources or geography. It was the particular character that Carney honored in the Library of Parliament, a willingness to attempt things that others said were impossible, to go further when others said enough, to build in conditions that would stop most people before they started. The oil sands themselves are the most powerful example. When Carney was born in Fort Smith in the Northwest Territories, just north of the Alberta border, the oil sands were a concept, a geological curiosity, a dream held by a small number of scientists and entrepreneurs who believed that bitumen locked in sand could be extracted and upgraded into oil at commercially viable scale. By the time he was in junior high in Edmonton, that dream had been transformed into one of Canada's largest industries, not by a government program, by Alberta workers and engineers and entrepreneurs who refused to accept that the word impossible was the final answer. That is the Alberta that Carney stood in the Library of Parliament and honored. And that is the Alberta that is now applying the same spirit to building the carbon capture technology that will make its oil the most environmentally credentialed product in the global energy market. We used to build in this country. Alberta never stopped.
I look forward to working alongside Premier Smith, alongside the Leader of the Opposition, alongside all parliamentarians, all 37 members from Alberta, and Canadians of all stripes, Albertans of all stripes, to build a better Alberta, build a better Canada.
Build a better Alberta, build a better Canada. Those two goals have been treated as competing objectives for too long in Canadian political life. The separatist movement that gathered 301,000 signatures in Alberta earlier this month drew its energy from exactly that perceived competition. From the accumulated frustration of a province that felt its contributions were taken for granted and its priorities were consistently subordinated to the preferences of governments that did not understand it. Carney's response to that frustration has been consistent, and it has been the right one. Not argument, not constitutional negotiation, not the performance of sympathy without the delivery of results. A pipeline agreement with specific dates, a carbon market that actually works, a methane reduction commitment that makes Alberta oil globally competitive, a $1 billion Arctic fund that creates careers for Alberta workers across the North, a Teen Canada Strong program that trains 100,000 new apprentices with Alberta unions at the center of the delivery, and a visit to the Library of Parliament to stand next to a window overlooking a building under renovation and say plainly what needed saying. Alberta is not peripheral to Canada's future. Alberta is essential to it. The famous five came to this city a century ago and changed what it means to be a person in Canada. Alberta workers and engineers are building the pipeline and the carbon capture technology that will define Canada's energy future for the next several decades. Build a better Alberta. Build a better Canada. Those are not competing goals. They never were. And the renovation that is underway right now in Parliament and across the country is finally making that truth impossible to ignore. Stay with this channel for the analysis that connects every piece of what Canada is building.